Welcome to the Big House Bleachers Podcast, proud member of the Block M Podcast Network, brought to you by Fans First Sports. Mr. Hartwell, the city of Detroit hosted the NFL draft, and those boys showed out in Detroit, man. It was a spectacular event. So you and I are going to talk a little bit about that. We'll talk J.J. McCarthy, Blake Corum, Mike Sainristil, and some others. But first, we've got some transfer portal action. So I'm going to jump right in. We picked up Dominique Zvada, kicker. I don't even know if I said that last name right. I don't know if the Z is silent. We'll figure this out. But to me, this was a really big pickup, man. We saw Adam Samaha struggle, miss a 30-yarder in the spring game. And sure enough, we got a solid kicker from Arkansas State in the transfer portal. What is your assessment of this guy?
I love this pickup. Obviously there was a lot of, not outrage, but there was a little bit of an outcry, if you will, following the spring game after Samaha's slight struggles, if you will. The kid is still young. He's still got some stuff to learn, so I don't think there's any reason for us to, ship this kid across seas to China or anything at this point. But bringing in a transfer portal addition that is very well capable in Zavada is, I think, exactly what you wanted the Wolverines to do, and I think that he fills a huge need, and he's going to be very capable this upcoming season.
Yeah, in 2022, he was 30 of 31 from extra point, so he missed one in there. We don't know. Maybe it was a weird hold or something. We don't know, but 30 of 31 is good. In college, that's good. 17 out of 18 field goals, and that was 2 years ago. That's solid. And then last year, 41 of 41 extra points. Perfect. That's exactly what you want. And then 17 of 22. But I think he was a Lou Groza Award finalist last year, even with the 5 missed field goals. I think it's because the dude was hitting a lot of long field goals. I mean, this guy is very capable of stepping up, hitting a 50-plus yarder in a clutch situation. I might be wrong. Maybe he was a Lou Groza finalist 2 years ago. I don't really know, but I do know he was a Lou Groza finalist one of those 2 years. Really big pickup for Sharon Moore. Another name that started to trickle into the transfer portal news is a name that Michigan fans are very familiar with in a unique and we'll call it a novel turn of events. Amarion Walker, who transferred away from Michigan just a couple months ago, spent a little time, I guess, mucking around in Mississippi, decided, you know what? I think I want to come back to Michigan. He's not committed yet, but there are some strong crystal balls indicating that Amarion Walker may be coming back to Ann Arbor. The real question is, and I don't know if you have any intel on this, Matt, is this guy going to play wide receiver or cornerback if he comes back to Michigan?
Well, for my understanding, Mike, the general sense is that if Amarion Walker returns, he will be coming back to fill the role of receiver, something that Michigan desperately needs. I kind of, you can kind of read the tea leaves a little bit at this point. I believe that he went down there to Mississippi, attempted to continue upon his process of, building his corner persona, and it just doesn't seem to be coming to fruition at this point. Now, that's just entirely speculation, but the word is that he's looking to switch back to wide receiver. So, like I said, if you kind of read the tea leaves, it sounds like this whole corner endeavor is not working out the way that Omarion or any of his previous coaches would have hoped that it would. So looking to switch back to receiver, something that Michigan desperately needs depth at. And it just kind of makes sense. He's kind of an unproven commodity at either position at this point. Michigan knows the deal with Walker, knows what they're getting, knows his speed, knows everything about him. So it just kind of makes sense. But, it's all up in the air until something official comes down the pipeline. There was a lot of smoke about Nakai Hill-Green coming back to Michigan. And as you can see, he just
Dion got him.
committing to Colorado yesterday. So, nothing's done until it's done. But as of right now, looking very good for Omarion Walker's return to Michigan.
Yeah, Nakai Hill-Green followed me on Twitter, and I texted you. I was like, oh, confirmed. He's coming back to Ann Arbor. Like, why the hell would this guy follow me otherwise? I mean, I'm pretty much primarily a Michigan account. But apparently Deion Sanders had other things to do with him. And actually, I think it was the same day or within about 48 hours, Montrez Walker, former linebacker commit from Georgia that had decommitted from Michigan, also committed to the Colorado Buffaloes. And so, you know what, Deion? Good luck to you, sir, but I'm no longer interested or intrigued in what you have going on over there in Colorado. As far as Omarion Walker is concerned, I really believe that this guy could be a playmaker, right? Like, this guy could be a baller. We know that he is, in fact, a very good athlete, and he's rough around the edges. And when you have a guy that's rough around the edges, I would much rather have him on offense than on defense. That's just my take right there, right? Like, if a guy's going to do some things that are a little unpredictable, maybe he needs some time to get going, let him be a receiver. We see success with guys like that. Samaj Morgan is a very good example, right? Really good athlete, kind of rough around the edges, explosive. I don't want a guy in my secondary that's, a little inconsistent and unpredictable. And so let's go ahead and put him on offense, a little bit more depth at receiver. So let's hope. I mean, we're talking about him like he's coming back. We don't know that for a fact, but it appears as though he's a heavy Michigan lean right now. Jeremiah Beasley, who was once considered the number 14 linebacker in the country coming in for this freshman class, he decommitted from Michigan. I don't really know why. I mean, after Ernest Hausman and Jayshon Barham, there seems to be room for a guy like him to maybe make some moves. He either didn't like where he was being played at right now, or actually, I don't even know. Was he there for the spring game, or is he not even enrolled yet? He was there, right?
Yes, he was there, and I think, Mike, if you're asking my opinion, I think it's the Cole Sullivan effect, right? I mean, you've got Beasley, who was very highly touted heading into Michigan as a recruit. But, you have the emergence of guys, and prior to this offseason, like, linebacker was almost considered to be a position that Michigan might not have substantial depth at. After these last few months, it's looking very promising with Barham and Hausman heading things up. You've got guys like Jaden Hood and Jimmy Rolder kind of coming to his own, which is the word on the street. And then behind that, you've got Cole Sullivan that's drawing a lot of positive hype as a rookie. Beasley might just kind of fall into that category of, not really wanting to wait things out, being as highly touted of a recruit as he was. And it just might be a case of looking to pursue other opportunities in the day of college football that we're in these days.
Yeah, I don't know Jeremiah Beasley personally, and so this is not an attack on him, but an overarching statement about the era of the transfer portal and NIL is, it feels like guys are scared of competition now, which is crazy. The guys that I see getting ready for the NFL draft are the guys that stuck around. I mean, that doesn't mean you can't transfer. You can transfer, but it's like guys are walking onto campus and they're like, oh, if I'm not in the too deep, I'm going somewhere else. And it's like, yeah, you might have been one of the best players in the country in high school, but that doesn't guarantee you a spot in the too deep on one of the best teams in the country or a defending national championship team. We even saw J.J. McCarthy come in and very patiently sit behind Cade McNamara, who we all knew was not going to be as good as J.J. McCarthy. But at the time, that was the right decision, right? Let him mature, let him grow, let him earn his spot. So I just think these guys are scared of a little competition nowadays, and I don't like the mess. Like, if my kid was going into a situation like that, I would say, listen, give it 2 or 3 years. You can always transfer for your senior season if you need to, but these guys aren't willing. Yeah, I feel like it's one of those iron sharpens iron situations, right? Like, go Go compete against the best so you can be the best. Speaking of trying to compete against the best, Kentucky just, seems to be throwing money at our guys or something. Kentucky always, this last offseason, it was the Twins. They got the defensive line boys, the Twins. Their name escapes me, but I've talked about them extensively, so I don't know why I can't even remember their names. But then we have Amir Herring, the offensive lineman, just hit the portal and committed to I'm sorry, DJ Waller committed to Kentucky. So let's talk about Waller first. Waller, who I said was the number one player coming out of the spring game. I was like, this dude impressed me the most. And then, sure enough, he hits the transfer portal like 2 days later. Is this a Jair Hill thing? What do we got going on here? This was completely unexpected for me.
I mean, if it's in my opinion, Mike, I think it's entirely an NIL thing. You look at DJ Waller, who, was largely thought about to be competing for that cornerback 2 spot. It seemed relatively undisputed at this time, and that's nothing to take away from Jair Hill. It seems as though he was also competing for that spot, but the word from many was that DJ Waller was kind of the front runner to land that role. And even if he wasn't, the spring game just concluded. He had an excellent performance in that game. A lot of momentum to fill that role heading into next season. So, I mean, if you ask me, it's got to be an NIL thing. Waller had a very close relationship with Steve Clinkscale, who is at Kentucky.
So
reading the tea leaves again, we're reading tea leaves today. If you're looking at things like that, you kind of have to assume that there's some things at work there, and DJ Waller was probably in pursuit of, padding his pockets a little bit more, and that's just speculation on my end, but college football just kind of is what it is in today's day and age, and he looked to be filling that cornerback spot. So, it is what it is. But I think Michigan will carry on. They'll find a way to do what they do best and fill that need. Jair Hill has been drawing impeccable praise out of spring ball. So I'm excited to see what he can do. I'm excited to see if Michigan can possibly land some additional depth maybe in the transfer portal at that spot. But it's certainly not over as far as the corner position is concerned for Michigan football. It just kind of sucks.
Coach Klink is like, wait, you mean to tell me I can just drop a bag on this guy? I couldn't do that in Ann Arbor. We got the NCAA all up in our ass over there. Kentucky's like, yeah, man, here, just make it rain over here. Just spread, just throw some dollar bills around and see what happens. And of course, DJ Waller came running. But as we saw with Amarion, if a guy leaves, it doesn't mean it's over for good. And then the guy I was referencing earlier, who I got confused about just for a second there, was Amir Herring. This one hurt. This one honestly hurt. Amir Herring is an up-and-comer on the offensive line. Big hit here. I did not see this coming. He entered the portal, but the offensive line is still fine. He was not going to be a starter on this line, but it did appear as though he was in the 2-deep rotation, to me anyway. And so this is a tough one. We shall see how this pans out.
And it did, Mike, and I assume you're referencing his play during the spring game where he showed up in one of those 2 starting rotations for, I believe it was the blue team. And, he was there in one of those first starting lines that trotted out on the field. So you have to assume that he was at least competing for that 2-deep spot. And also, even last season, garnered a ton of snaps. So this is definitely one that you hate to see go, especially, the way that you build offensive linemen up through the Michigan system. For him to go, it's definitely a little bit of a blow for the way that Michigan likes to recruit and develop their offensive linemen.
Well, enough about the transfer portal. I mean, it's been mostly, I wouldn't say terrible news, but bad news. Getting the kicker is huge, in my opinion. Like, that's one that will fly under the radar, but that's a huge positive for Michigan. We've been kind of spoiled at that position, and the last thing we want is an inconsistent field goal kicker with a bunch of new starters on offense. You know, that's a recipe for leaving points on the field. So having a kicker is solid. Let's get into the NFL draft that happened in the great city of Detroit. J.J. McCarthy, top 10 draft pick to the Minnesota Vikings. But I'm going to be honest with you. He fell a little bit further than I expected. Coming in, I thought that the Vikings might trade up to that 4 or 5 spot. They took a chance. It worked out. I think the Vikings got their guy, and then I also think J.J. McCarthy got the team that he wanted. And so here's what we're going to do. You and I are going to run through every Michigan player that got drafted. There's a lot of them. Michigan did set the all-time school record with 13 players drafted, 2 shy of the all-time single draft record set by Georgia that was 15. We thought Michigan might have a shot at that 15. They did not, though. They kind of fell flat there in the 5th and 6th round, and then they made up some ground in the 7th, but still fell short of the record. So let's rate all of these draft picks with their team fit. If it's not a good fit at all, terrible fit, 0. If it's an amazing fit, we're going to say 10 out of 10. 10. So I'm going to let you go first with J.J. McCarthy. Minnesota Vikings, J.J. McCarthy. Is this a good fit?
Well, Mike, it's a man that needs no introduction, right? The great J.J. McCarthy heads to Minnesota. In my opinion, this is an excellent fit, 10 out of 10. If you remember correctly, when we first started our draft discussions here on the pod, I mocked J.J. to the Vikings, although it was a little bit lower than he ended up getting drafted at. That was before he started to garner all of the hype, and Jim Harbaugh came out with the famous, "I wouldn't be surprised if he's the first quarterback drafted" quote and all of that. And he was mocked way later into the first round. I projected him to go with the Vikings' second pick in that first round. He ended up going with their first pick at 10. They traded up a spot to get him. I think that this is just the guy to step in and lead that franchise. As a Lions fan, I kind of hate to see it, but at the same time, I'm excited by the challenge of the Lions having to play one of my favorite college quarterbacks of all time, twice a season. I'm excited that I'm going to get to see him play more frequently in that sense. But not so excited about the potential of what he can do and how he can hurt the Lions in the long run.
And let me just say that J.J. McCarthy against Aiden Hutchinson twice a year, I mean, that's just the stuff dreams are made of, the NFL just got exponentially more interesting for Michigan fans this year because of all the really cool matchups. And then you got the Harbaugh factor and a couple guys going to L.A. Out there to play for the Chargers. So we'll get to that. Very interesting. J.J. McCarthy and the Minnesota Vikings are without a doubt a 10 out of 10 fit. I hate to engage in hyperbole when we're rating these things 1 to 10, and this is the first guy we're talking about, so throwing it a 10 just seems extreme. There's no other way to look at it. When you have a highly ranked quarterback recruit walk into a situation where his targets are Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson, are you kidding me? Like, when the Giants passed on J.J. McCarthy at I think it was like 6 that they were picking at, I audibly cheered out loud. I did not want him to go to a team like Washington or the New York Giants, like the places that recent quarterbacks go to die, like please don't put JJ in one of those situations. He's up there, in the northern Midwest, where he belongs, Minnesota, away from the Bostons and Phillies and New Yorks of the world that will just like chew up a young quarterback and not give him a chance.
Also a big
mention
hockey state. You take into account JJ's hockey background. Minnesota is like one of the hockey epicenters. So I think there's going to be a lot more open-mindedness among the fan base to kind of take him in. There's the clip that's circulating around during his one of his introductory Zoom calls with the Vikings where he declines the call from Wayne Gretzky to keep talking.
Yeah.
I mean, this kid is going to fit right in Minnesota, there in the Midwest, and I think that, it's honestly the perfect fit.
Yeah, so JJ 10 out of 10, we agree. And actually, he walked into, in my opinion, the best situation of any quarterback that got drafted in the entire draft, right? Because everybody that got drafted below him, Bo Nix actually found himself a nice little spot. We'll see, we'll see what the Broncos can do, but I would still say that's not a great situation to be in considering Russell Wilson couldn't get anything going with the Broncos. But basically everybody below JJ except for Bo Nix is not going to be a starter. They're going to be waiting around. Everybody that got drafted above JJ got drafted into a shitty situation. Michael Penix, that was interesting. That was the talk of the draft. But let me just ask you this, Matt. Does JJ start week 1 for the Vikings?
I mean, I would venture to say so. Who's their backup?
Right?
Darnold? Is that it?
Is Darnold out there? Because here's the thing. The Vikings rotated through so many quarterbacks last year. I feel like if you're going to draft him in the top 10, you're going to start him week 1.
Exactly.
So,
and especially if I'm right about the Darnold thing right now. I'm going to have to second check that. But, you gotta just go with it. The kid is a winner. You drafted him at pick number 10. He's got a proven pedigree. He's only lost like how many games since high school? I mean, this is a kid that you got to give
Sam Darnold.
a shot.
You're right. Sam Darnold, Nick Mullins, Jaron Hall. So yeah, maybe they say Sam Darnold, for a few weeks to but I wouldn't even see that. JJ's going to pick up the playbook. He's smart. He's a competitor. I think JJ goes week 1. Chris Jenkins was the next one drafted. Let's see here. Let me get my notes out. Chris Jenkins went with the number 49 overall pick, round 2 to the Cincinnati Bengals.
The Cincinnati Wolverines, don't you mean?
It's starting to look like it, man. It's starting to look like it. So 1 to 10. How confident are you that this is a good fit for Chris Jenkins, who, I remind you, has the NFL pedigree, right? His dad was also a very impressive football player.
I think this is a perfect fit, Mike. And, if you look at my ratings, prior to us going through these, you would see that I'm going to think that a lot of these guys that were taken towards the top of the draft were really good fits. But Jenkins, I think, is another excellent fit. I marked him at a 10 out of 10. Cincinnati, they needed a replacement in the middle for DJ Reader. Jenkins perfectly kind of fits that mold. On top of that, the Bengals' run defense was a super sore spot last season, right? Allowing 126 yards per game on the ground. I think Chris Jenkins is the perfect guy that you put there in that role to kind of fill some of those gaps and improve on some of those misgivings from last year.
Yeah, and it looks like so he might not start from the jump, right? I mean, second round defensive tackle. I believe they got Sheldon Rankins from Houston, I'm not mistaken, and then also B.J. Hill could be a starter down there. But I would fully expect Chris Jenkins to get a lot of snaps early and often, and probably by the end of the year solidify a starting position for the Bengals. I'm going to give it an 8. Did you give it a number? I missed it. Did you give it a number out of 10?
I did give it a 10, and I completely agree
10.
with you. It probably won't be something that comes to fruition, in weeks 1, 2, or 3 of this upcoming season, but I think there's a definite, at least immediate rotational role for Jenkins to be had there after he has a chance to kind of develop within the Bengals system. And he's got a lot to offer a team that, was egregious against the run last year.
It's interesting, but I really believe that Chris Jenkins could have a better pro career than college career. He's just one of those guys. He's got that just undying enthusiasm for football and for life, and I could see him get better and better and better. And I think the NFL scouts kind of know that too. I think they look at him, and he was in the middle of a very, very talented interior defensive line for the last couple years at Michigan, and he definitely didn't get lost in the mix. I mean, he held his own, but if he was on a team that just didn't have the talent that Michigan had, I think you would be able to see like, oh shit, this guy was like, the dude on basically any other team in the country. But in Michigan, he was just like one of the dudes because the team was so good. So an 8 and a 10, I think that's fair. Really good fit. Mike Sainristil. So we got our first of many back-to-back Michigan guys drafted. So he went the very next pick to the Washington Commanders, number 50 overall. How do you rate this fit?
Mike, I've got this one at a 9 out of 10. I think it's another excellent fit. The Commanders very short on secondary after last year. It was a bad spot for them. I think they lose their top cornerback in Kendall Fuller to free agency. So there's really almost an immediate opportunity for Sainristil to contribute in some ways for this Washington Commanders team. I love how that they kind of reached up and took him. Before the draft, there was a lot of talk about him, and his size and possibly not being able to compete. I'm so glad that this kid's talent was able to shine through all that. His ability to make plays, his ball hawking ability. I just think that a lot of these NFL teams see right through that with Mike Sainristil, and I think that's going to continue into the beginning of this next season, and you will see Sainristil on the field until he carves out, a more significant role.
Yeah, so Washington drafts anybody that I like, and I immediately the fit meter starts at 2, right? Because Washington's one of those teams that I'm just like, I just don't want them to draft my players, like the Jets or something. Like I'm just like, just stay away from Michigan guys. I don't want any guys to go to a team where like players traditionally go and their careers die. Washington has kind of been one of those places for several years, especially for quarterbacks. Like if JJ would have gone to Washington, I would have been like, shit, But let me just throw this out there. I like what the Commanders are doing. I like that they're going after dogs. They're going after players that are good football players. It's almost like they completely ignored the measurables with their first several picks and were like, we want guys that know how to play this game. Because that Jaden Daniels draft pick, that's exactly what that is, right? Jaden Daniels is like the quarterback version of Mike Sainristil, right? He doesn't necessarily stack up with the measurables, but you turn on a game and every single play, he's making a play. So I'm going to take my 2. I'm going to average it with a 10 because I'm going to – so it's a 10 out of 10, but the Commanders come in with a baseline 2, so I'm going to give it a 6. I'm going to give it a nice even 6, so above average, good fit. I do think that Mike Sainristil is going to start in the nickel position week 1. Because I'm just looking at their roster right now, and I'm like, yeah, they probably will put him in there, So it's going to be a sink or swim type situation, which can be very good or very bad for a young player. Everything I know about Mike Sainristil tells me he's up for the challenge. All right. And then the Los Angeles Chargers, had a pick. The guy comes up on stage, and he said, and before he announces the pick, the guy on stage says, Jim Harbaugh got one of his boys. And I was like, uh-oh, Corum or Wilson? Like, who did Harbaugh just, I thought it was Blake Corum, Roman Wilson. He reached up, 69 overall. Like, which one of his boys did he get? And then Junior Colson goes off the board. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You got Jesse Minter in L.A., Junior Colson, who has led Michigan in tackling for the last, 70 years. And then Junior Colson was also nursing significant injuries all last season. Didn't really miss any time and played fantastic all the way through. He's the leader of the defense. He really the quarterback of that Michigan defense for the last 3 years, you could say. Man, it's hard to say that this isn't just a fantastic fit. You're literally going to Jesse Minter, your defensive coordinator, and your former head coach, going to LA. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. The only reason it's not a 10 out of 10 is because I think the linebacker position can be a really difficult position to get thrown into action early as a pro, and I think Colson probably will be. I'm going to let you talk for a little bit, and then I'm going to look at the depth chart because I don't know what linebackers they have currently. I'm assuming he's going to get thrown in there early because they drafted him so high. So for me, 9 out of 10.
Well, Mike, from my understanding, Los Angeles desperately needed a linebacker, especially one that could excel in pass coverage. And that's exactly what Junior Colson brings to the table, and Jim Harbaugh, Jesse Minter both know that. I don't think this was a reach by any means on their end to go up and get Colson. I think that he fits the mold perfectly, and I think that so long as he can stay healthy, and as we've seen in the past, even if he doesn't stay healthy, I think that this is a guy that has the opportunity to possibly start even week 1 for the Los Angeles Chargers. He's NFL ready. The guy's a total dog. I'm going to give this pick a 10 out of 10. I think it was just perfect. I cheered out loud when I heard it, the part that you referenced about Jim Harbaugh getting one of his boys. But I'm really excited for it, and I think we'll see Junior Colson out there early for Jesse Minter. 10 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, I'm looking at this depth chart, and you're probably right. He probably will start early. They got Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa on that defense. Can you imagine, man? Those guys coming up around the edges, and then Junior Colson, holding down the middle there. I'm starting to realize that Jim Harbaugh is going to win a lot of football games, I think, in year 1. This team's going to be very good. And with his game control on offense, drafting Joe Alt, offensive lineman in the first, few picks, I really think that the Chargers are going to, have a really good season. So let's keep it moving. Blake Corum, who's a little undersized for the NFL at the running back position, also goes in the 3rd round, pick number 83 overall. That was immediately after. Wait, hold on. No, that was not immediately after. So the 3 in a row in round 3 were Blake Corum, Roman Wilson, Zach Zinter. Rams, Steelers, Browns, back to back to back, just like they did in the Big Ten. Michigan guys holding it down with the 3-peat at the NFL draft. So let's run through these quick. Blake Corum to the Rams, 1 to 10. How good of a fit is that?
Here, I'm going to go with a 7 out of 10. And the reason for that is because I think that Blake Corum falls right into a role with the Rams where, he's probably most projected at as far as, an NFL running back. They have the emergence of Kyron Williams from last season who, was very capable in his time. And I think Blake Corum slides right in there, as a secondary option to him. And I think that they'll kind of alternate between the two, and you'll see Corum a little bit. But, you'll still see a lot of Kyron Williams. So, I think for where Corum was projected at, where he lands now with the Rams, I think it's a perfectly average pickup and an average fit for where you would have expected him to go. Nothing super shocking, but I do think it's a good fit. So I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, this one's exciting for me, but I just don't know if it's a great fit. I have faith that Corum can make some things work, but I also just don't know if that offensive system fits Corum's style the way that I would want it to. It almost feels like a guy like Donovan Edwards might even fit into that a little better than Blake Corum.
I am encouraged by the Rams wide receivers' ability to go out there and block, right? Because, that's where Corum thrives, is within a physical offense with a lot of blocking. I like how the Rams receivers block. I think that Corum has a little bit of a nice opportunity to showcase his abilities stepping into that system, but I'm also kind of with you with being on the fence with how it will ultimately all come to fruition once the season starts. So it's a little bit of a wait and see for me, but for now, I'm going to mark it pretty averagely with that 7.
Yeah, I'm going to give it like a 5. I'm still optimistic. We're talking strictly about fit here. This was a guy I really wanted to go to the Chargers. He went to the right city, but the wrong team. But yeah, looking at their running back depth chart as it stands currently, Corum will be the number 2 guy. He'll be number 2. And we all know that in today's NFL, number 2 means like you're like 1B kind of like you're gonna get carries right away. So I'm excited to stash him on my fantasy team just in case. All right, let's keep it rolling. So right after Corum, Roman Wilson to the Steelers. It's interesting. I almost feel like Roman Wilson to the Rams and Corum to the Steelers would have made a little more sense to my brain, right? You got like flash versus blue collar, but nevertheless, Mike Tomlin liked what he saw with Roman Wilson. Pick number 85 overall in the draft. He is going to the Steelers, and I believe Russell Wilson is their quarterback now, right? So that could be a good situation. Where do you rank that?
I love the fit as far as Roman Wilson as a Steeler, right? I think he comes bearing the perfect attitude, the perfect chip on his shoulder to fit kind of what the Steelers mold is all about, right? I love the fit. I gave it an 8 out of 10. The only thing that makes me a little bit iffy is that the Steelers do have, quite a few young receivers that are like all competing among each other for playing time. I've read quite a bit out there since the end of the draft that, Wilson may be projected to be the number 2 option among all those receivers. But I think that still doesn't change the fact that, you've got guys like George Pickens, Calvin Austin, Van Jefferson, who are all, in a youthful phase in their careers. So I think there'll be a little bit of, Denzel Mims. There'll be quite a bit of competition there, but, with how chippy Wilson is, with how we know him to be able to carve out his role, I think that he'll be just fine and that he'll eventually have a strong role within that Steelers offensive system. So I'm going to give it like an 8 or 9 out of 10. I like it.
Yeah, I like the fit a lot. I'll say 8 out of 10. I don't know about immediate impact. I could see him being the number 3 option in the slot, right? I think for sure he got drafted as a slot receiver. A lot of people think he could be like a Julian Edelman or maybe even more like a Tyler Lockett kind of a receiver. You shift him around, get him open in space. George Pickens and Van Jefferson, at least in year 1, those are going to be your guys, I think. But I think Roman Wilson can eat when those guys are pulling the safeties. And, we know when you get Wilson a little bit of space, he's going to make some plays. I could definitely see him being the number 3 guy, lining up in that slot. So I'm going to say, did I say 8 out of 10? I think 8 out of 10 is a good spot there. And then we all know that the state of Ohio is infatuated with Michigan players. And so Cleveland and Cincinnati are proving that once again. Cleveland goes and gets our guy Zach Zinter in the 3rd round with the 85th overall pick. Dog pound, Zach Zinter, let's go. I'm just going to call this a 9 out of 10 just for some, good, rough around the edges, O-line kind of a situation. What about you?
I'm giving it a 10 out of 10, Mike. And as far as
Yeah.
Inter goes, coming off of that ugly injury that he suffered last year against Ohio State, I think it's perfect for him. And this is a draft pick that has like succession plan written all over it, right? The Browns, they've got Pro Bowl guards Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller, who are two of the Browns, great offensive line players. They're both scheduled to become free agents after the 2025 season. That gives Zinter all the opportunity that he needs to sit, learn behind those guys, and eventually take up a starting role after those guys are gone. Coming off of that injury, I don't think that, diving right into a starting spot on the Browns offensive line is something that would necessarily be great for him. Give him a year, give him the opportunity to learn, and then take up that starting mantle after some of those guys are gone, and boom, you've got an impeccable NFL-level offensive lineman that can contribute as soon as he's able to during that time.
I agree. I say year 2, Zinter moves into that position. I could see him being like a 10-year starter, in the NFL.
Same.
I could really see that. That's just, and like maybe even, nudging up against that Pro Bowl kind of, status. But that's if he gets to 100% healthy and is able to continue his trajectory and growth. So, we're all hoping that his leg gets back to normal, which a lot of times with breaks, these guys, don't have lingering effects. It's the tendons and ligaments that you really want to worry about. When a bone breaks, usually it just heals up and it's okay. So hopefully in Zinter's case, that is the case. Moving right along, a guy that I had him getting drafted higher than I think most people, but he got drafted even higher than I expected. A.J. Barner to the Seattle Seahawks. You have to assume that Mike Macdonald watched a Michigan game or two this last season. So former defensive coordinator Mike Macdonald goes and gets our guy A.J. Barner, who might be the best blocking tight end in this entire draft. He goes in the 4th round, pick 121 overall. Where do you rate that fit?
I've got it right at a 7, and don't forget about Jay Harbs, right? He's right there with Mike Macdonald in Seattle now. You have to assume those two conspired to have a little bit of discussion about Barner during that time that pick was happening. I think that he fits right in. Seattle, they lose a couple tight ends following the conclusion of last season. So he figures, I think, to slot in at that Y tight end spot. If he's able to carve out a role. If anything, I think there's a place for him on special teams with Jay Harbaugh. He contributed significantly to that during his time with Michigan. I think that A.J. Barner will find a home with Seattle. Eventually, I don't know if it'll be this season or anything like that, but one of the best blocking tight ends in the nation last year, for more than half of the season last year, was consistently rated as one of PFF's highest rated players on Michigan's roster because of his run blocking prowess week in and week out. So I think he brings a lot of that physicality that you want at the NFL level. So I'm going to give that one a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm good with the 7 out of 10. I think Barner's going to see the field a lot, and I think he's going to get one target or so in the games that he plays. I think they're going to have a package or a play where they're like, okay, let's toss it to him. But, Noah Fant is going to get the targets, I think, from the tight end position. I think Barner's going to be heavily involved in that offense. I mean, he's the kind of player, we saw it at Michigan. He's the kind of player that you want to have heavily involved in your blocking schemes. He's certainly a capable receiver. I just don't think that he's necessarily going to get all of the targets, especially not in year 1 or 2. So I'm good with a 7 there. And then this was the part of the draft where it was like, okay, like we're like Bueller, Bueller. Has anybody seen Bueller? Like we're just like kind of waiting.
Are any Michigan guys getting drafted?
Yeah. I started to like spiral. I'm like, we're only gonna have 9 guys drafted. We thought we were gonna have 20, and now we got 9. And finally, and actually, when that was happening, Trevor Keegan was the guy that I was like, I can't believe teams are passing on this guy. Like, to me, and I know the NFL's different, right? Being a good offensive lineman in the college is different than being a good offensive lineman in the pros. And I trust these NFL draft scouts a hell of a lot better than I trust my own brain to evaluate offensive linemen. But at the end of the day, a guy like Trevor Keegan, I'm just like, I don't know how you let the 4th round go by without picking him. But it did. He goes in the 5th round, pick number 172 overall. And he goes to what I would consider a really good spot, a good culture for offensive lines. I mean, we saw Travis Kelce in Philadelphia up until this last year. We've also seen Michigan players make a home in Philadelphia for a long time. Of course, I'm talking about Brandon Graham, who has spent now 15 seasons on that defense. I mean, just a lifer, Philadelphia Eagle. So Trevor Keegan, I'm going to give that an 8. He's not going to start. He's not going to start as a rookie, but he's definitely a guy that if either one of those guards goes down with an injury, he might be the next man up.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm going to give that pick a 9. I think that this is literally the perfect fit for Keegan. When you looked at a lot of people's draft boards, I don't think Keegan tested particularly well, like at the combine and at certain areas. There were a lot of boards that had Carson Barnhart rated above him. And if like all these teams were going in accordance to that, like you would have barely expected Keegan to get picked up at all. I was thankful to see Philadelphia, take a flyer on him and do it, in a general round that he probably deserved to go in, and kind of put all that to the side. He lands in a situation with Philadelphia where, they could use some offensive line depth. And he lands with a guy in Jeff Stoutland, who's probably has one of the best reputations in the NFL with developing late round offensive line picks. Look at guys like Fatai out of TCU, Jason Kelce, Jordan Mailata. These are all guys that this Jeff Stoutland has had a hand in hugely developing late in the draft. I think Trevor Keegan's going to fit right in there. Fit right into what that city's all about. I just think it's a perfect fit. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. We're pretty close there. And then the next guy that got drafted after another long drought, right? We're sitting there and we're like, okay, we got our 10th guy. And then the record was 15. So every Michigan fan's kind of keeping track, like hoping we can get the record. We had 18 invited to the combine. So you're thinking, all right, 15 is not out of the question. And then we kind of stalled out in that 9-10 range, and it was like, oh man, maybe this is going to be like, I had one of those moments where I'm like, maybe I let my fanhood blur reality, right? Because I was so confident that like all of these guys are NFL players, and I was like, maybe I was wrong. Maybe just 9 or 10 of them, and my bias got in the way. Well,
my boy
things started to pick
his
up.
Whole life.
Yeah, I'm spiraling. I'm having an existential crisis over here.
I mean, I went to Chili's like halfway through the 7th round. I'm like, I'm fucking done with this. I'm going to Chili's with my wife. Gonna eat a nice grilled chicken dinner, sit down, and then boom.
Yeah. There you go, man. Just crying tears on your Southwest egg rolls and onion blossom. Okay. So Michael Barrett going to the Carolina Panthers. I can't quantify why, but to me, this is a 10 out of 10 fit. And I really don't know why. The Panthers are not the best organization. Bear in mind, he got drafted in the 6th round, so I don't expect him to step in and start. Something about this just feels right to me. I think it's like Carolina, the colors, the baby blue and black. I could see Mike Barrett really looking mean in those colors. I somehow believe that he's going to end up on the field a bunch and like steal a spot, because that's just who Michael Barrett is, right? Like he's always there. He's always making plays. He's a leader. He's the winningest player in Michigan football history, and he's an underdog. I mean, he's that's just what he is. He's an underdog, and something about Carolina screams underdog to me. And so we're talking just about the fit. I love it. And you know what? If you said it's a 4, I would be like, okay, I don't even disagree with you. Like maybe that's real. But every now and then in sports, you got to throw out the numbers and just go with feel. And for me, Carolina feels right for Michael Barrett.
I respect that. I do. I'm going to give it, let me start here, because I went through a whole wave of emotions as it pertains to this pick. First, just the thought that Mike Barrett might not be drafted, I was incredibly sad, right? Because here's the guy that we've followed for a long time. He's been just at the epicenter of everything Michigan for the last few years. He's one of my favorite guys on the team. The thought that he possibly might not get drafted just made me very sad. When he finally was drafted, I cheered out loud, almost threw that grilled chicken dinner off of the table at Chili's. But I love that he was picked up. I don't know how I feel about it being the Panthers. I'm going to give this pick a 6, just because the Panthers have numbers at linebacker, especially the will. So it is a situation where, Barrett is going to have to fight for time. That said, Mike Barrett is very comfortable with having to fight for time, just fighting in general. Mike Barrett, he's a fighter. I think that there's nothing that can hold that guy down. I think that he's destined to succeed on whatever team that he would have ended up on. And being that it's Carolina, I think that he sets off on his journey a little bit behind the 8 ball. But again, that said, it's Mike Barrett. He's going to find a way. He's going to impress those guys in the locker room, and he will be a part of this Carolina Panthers team, mark my words.
Yeah, Michael Barrett will forever be known as the player that got Matt Hartwell thrown out of a Chili's. So we'll just always remember that. Let's keep it moving. We are, we're a little bit over time here, so let's go kind of rapid fire on a few of these guys and some undrafted free agents. Ladarius Henderson to the Texans. I'm going to be honest, I don't know much about the Houston Texans offensive line, but I feel like a left tackle blocking for a guy like, did I get that right? He went to the Texans, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. It was Jalen Harrell that went to the Titans. I keep mixing that up. So, yeah, blocking for a guy like C.J. Stroud, I think that's the kind of guy you want to block for, right? Stroud is maneuverable in the pocket. Like he will make plays enough to not make you look bad as a left tackle, and so I think that's a good guy to block for. I'm just gonna say a 7 in honor of number 77. Heading to the Houston Texans. I'll give that a 7.
I got it. I'm gonna give that one a 5, just because.
Okay.
He was the second tackle that the Texans took in the draft, which was a bit of a head scratcher for me. I think that the Texans were more in need of more of a natural guard. So unless the idea is to move him to that guard position, I don't really understand the pick too much, just from a, putting together a roster type of standpoint and a fit type of standpoint. That being said, he's a big ass dude. And there's always a place where you can find to put a big-ass lineman. He obviously did very well with Michigan during the times that he was finally able to carve out a role there after the first few games. So I have faith in him. I think that he will be able to find a spot on this Texans team. But for now, and just for how the draft unfolded for the Texans, I'm going to give it a 5.
Yeah, and now that I'm looking at it, like he's going to be buried on that depth chart. And as a seventh rounder, they're not incentivized to get him on the field. And so I'm with you. That's probably not the best fit. And honestly, he was one that fell a lot lower than I thought he should have. The whole offensive line in general, but like I thought Ladarius was like a fourth round guy, and I knew he wasn't being evaluated that way, but I thought somebody would see that. They did not. He fell to the seventh, and then also in the seventh round, Jalen Harrell, like you said before we started recording, the best edge on the national championship winning team, falls to pick number 252, right near the end of the draft. Seventh round to the Tennessee Titans. How do you grade that?
I grade it as probably like a 6 or a 7. Another one that I don't love the fit for Harrell for, but when you take Harrell's measurables into account, a very undersized guy for an edge rusher, especially at the NFL level, he's definitely going to be required to kind of beef up his frame a little bit if he wants to fit in there. Another situation where he's going to have to kind of fight for rotational minutes at the edge position. So
Totally.
I don't truly love the fit for him, but again, he was taken in the seventh round, a bit undersized, so probably about as good as he could do for what he's bringing to the table at this point in his young NFL career.
I love that we got a guy that played that long at Michigan, and you and I still say his name differently. You've always said Harrell, and I've always said Harrell, and I don't know which one it is. I still don't. I mean, honestly, I need to ask the guy. Okay, so and then here's another one, and I'm gonna be honest. I would have been pissed if this guy did not get drafted, but I also figured he would be one of the last draft picks. It's just so this guy got drafted kind of where I thought he would. Cornelius Johnson, the most consistent, steady, good but not great receiver we've ever had at Michigan. Now, that's not a knock on him, actually. He had great moments. He had greatness in him. He's a great guy. He will forever be remembered as a legend for his, Ohio, especially 2022 Ohio State performance. But this is right around where I expected him to go. But I did not expect Jim Harbaugh to be the one to get him. That was exciting. Harbaugh picked up Cornelius Johnson. I think he was sitting there in the seventh round like, all right, let's just get Justin Herbert, another guy to throw it to and see what happens. Because of the head ball coach and because I do believe that I don't think we're going to see Cornelius Johnson on the field right away, but I think he'll be given a fair shot. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one like a 7 as well.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 7 or an 8. And, I think this was an absolute value pick for Jim Harbaugh and company when they made this decision. I think they had just picked up Braden or Brendan Rice or whatever his name is out of USC with their prior pick right before another wide receiver. So I think this was kind of a situation that Jim Harbaugh looked at and, couldn't believe that Cornelius was still on the board. And to a lot of your points, Mike, the fact that, he's a huge playmaker that just really didn't get a lot of opportunity to shine within the Michigan offense the last couple of seasons. So, I think the fact that he was sitting there like as one of the last picks in the draft was very desirable. He joins a fairly extensive wide receiver room at this point. So the battle for him to get a rotational spot within that offense is not going to be easy. But, I think that there's a lot that everyone hasn't seen from Cornelius yet that he can bring to an NFL offense. And I think that he'll have a spot there with Jim Harbaugh long term. So I'm just looking at this. I don't know if I said it. I give it a 7 or an 8.
Okay, we're on the same page there. I'm looking at this roster that Harbaugh has. I think the sneaky fantasy pickup this year is Isaiah Spiller. I'm seeing him as like the number 3 running back there, but you got J.K. Dobbins that's had some injury issues, Gus Edwards, who's solid from Baltimore. Man, I can't wait to get Isaiah Spiller in fantasy. But anyway, that's for a different show, different topic. I'll keep that to myself until the fantasy drafts roll around later in the summer. Let's just do a quick, let's wrap up all of the undrafted free agents kind of in one quick conversation.
We also
Braden
had
McGregor
one as we're on the show too. And that is James Turner to the Lions.
Hey! I was even gonna say the Lions didn't get anybody, but James Turner to the Lions, that's exciting. Who's the Lions kicker right now?
It is what's his name? I can't even remember. They used him so infrequently that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, this is not I don't want to put you on the spot there. We'll. You know what? I got the depth charts up right here. Let me check it out.
That's right.
Of course. And so, James Turner will have a shot. He'll be practice squad for sure, but that'll be fun. All right. So we got Braden McGregor to the Jets. We've got Josh Wallace to the LA Rams. Another guy to the Rams. Look at that. Trente Jones to the Packers. I just love that fit. We saw guys like. What's his face? I'll think of it in a second. The O-lineman that's been on the Packers forever from Michigan. Drake Nugent to the Niners, and Carson Barnhart also to the Chargers. I think Jim Harbaugh was like, hold up. Carson Barnhart didn't get drafted? Thank you very much. I'll scoop this guy up. Out of all those guys, the one that I was most surprised didn't get drafted is actually Braden McGregor. I thought that Braden McGregor, with his length, his ability to disrupt plays, his raw ability and progress that he's shown, I thought that he actually showed enough to get drafted. Granted, Drake Nugent and Carson Barnhart, to me, were also very draftable guys. Those are the three that I would have said would get drafted and would get us the record. When I predicted 16, it was all the guys that got drafted with Braden, Drake, and Carson. Trente Jones and Josh Wallace not getting drafted didn't really surprise me, but I'm glad they got picked up.
You're thinking about probably what is the best pick of these UDFAs. I would say Carson Barnhart. As this draft was progressing, I was looking at Barnhart, and I even had the thought, if Barnhart falls out of this draft, Jim Harbaugh is 100% calling Carson Barnhart to join his team as an undrafted free agent, just because, his evaluation is so skewed, right? You've got like all of this jumping around on the line, playing different positions, served primarily like as a tackle last year. The guy is really good as a guard, and that there's not a whole lot of tape of that to be seen on Barnhart. The Chargers need guard depth right now, and Carson Barnhart, with his versatility, how well he tested at the combine, I think it gives you everything you need in a guy that can come in and push that line for Jim Harbaugh and maybe even eventually, be a sleeper to land a starting role one day.
I agree. I completely agree. Carson Barnhart's going to start in the NFL one day. He's going to be one of these undrafted guys that's a starter in the NFL. Drake Nugent not getting drafted actually is shocking to me. But then again, I just don't know the needs of these teams. A center position is one where if not a lot of teams need a center, then you're going to fall. So that does it for this week. That is Matt Hartwell. I am Michael Smeltzer, and that was the Big House Bleachers Podcast. As always, go blue.
Go blue.